Greetings, fellow Americans. Welcome to Fireside Chats, State of Our Nation. I am your host, Susanna Tanner, candidate for Congress 2026 and President 2028. It's been quite eventful here very recently, I'd say. That's for certain. We're going to start off with something I received from Vancouver Public Schools, a little newsletter about the school district. Not only do they have a new superintendent, they have made $24 million in budget cuts. This means teachers get fired, kids don't get educated, and our nation suffers. The lack of funding is because our financial system is not structured properly for our state nor our nation. Our current tax codes allow high-income businesses to pay almost zero in taxes to our nation and our state. The SAISA, Secure America Infrastructure and Services Act, wipes out the old tax code and replaces it with a simplified tax code. And that tax code works for all of us. From the lowest of incomes to the highest of incomes. It works for all of us. The state and tax restructuring benefits us all. This is actually one of the biggest reasons why the Secure America Washington and Secure America Infrastructure Services Act are so important. Full funding for education, and everything else is factored into the structure of the lockbox system, both nationally and state. The S.A. Washington Act eliminates the B&O tax, sales tax, and the property tax levy. And instead, we contribute to our state through our income, the state progressive revenue contribution, which it's more than sufficient to support the needs of our state, fully fund our government, our education, our healthcare, all of it. At the national level, the SAISA contribution, the national revenue contribution, is more than sufficient to fully support everything within our nation at the national level, including universal healthcare. So in order for us to lower costs for everything within our state and our nation, we're going to have to restructure our finances. By adopting the lockbox system at both levels, we are lowering the cost of living in Washington for our residents and across the nation for the rest of us. The financial restructuring includes credits for a variety of items and eliminates much more than just loopholes in our tax code. Caregivers credits, environmental credits, education credits, and more are included in this new tax restructuring. So parents and child care providers, those who provide for people with disabilities long-term, they get caregiver credits. Corporations can get more than environmental credits, but they are the environmental credit is probably the biggest credit that they can get. Those are just some examples. The SAISA and the SA Washington are part of the National Integrity Initiative, which you can learn about in some of my previous episodes or read about it at tannerforcongress.com. I also received a pledge in the mail. It says U.S. Term Limits Amendment Pledge. Now, this pledge is for co-sponsoring and voting for the U.S. Term Limits Amendment of 3 2-year terms for the House, which is a total of 6 terms, and 2 6-year terms for the Senate, which is a total of 12 years. I firmly believe in term limits. However, let's talk about term limits for a minute. First, 2 consecutive Senate terms, 12 years. So the House is limited to half that time. That's not equality. That's not equality in our government. And to lead by example, we need to show within our government that we know how to exhibit leadership and equality. It's not even close to equality to keep term limits so staggered like that. Not staggered, so limited. If we leave the Senate terms at those 2 consecutive 6-year terms, then the House of Representatives should actually have 5 two-year terms that they can serve consecutively for a total of 10 years. So each house is allowed to serve up, around a decade. This way, you're not limiting the House to half the time of the Senate. And on top of that, look at how those term limits fall. If you've got someone who's serving 3 consecutive terms in the House and one person who has served a single term in the Senate, you could potentially have all of those representatives switching at the same time. It does happen. It does happen. So alternating how they're voted in or when they're voted in, that is also essential. Something missing here too is term limits for the Supreme Court. This particular act, to the best of my recollection, does not establish term limits for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court should not be a lifetime appointment. And the reason for that is because too many individuals, too many Supreme Court justices have shown that they are just as corrupt as the current administration. So establishing term limits for the United States Supreme Court is also important. And those term limits should be 3 5-year terms, tops, 15 years total. So once again, I do support term limits, but the term limits that are currently offered are not adequate enough for our system. I also happened to catch some of the Secretary of the Treasury's testimony to the Senate Appropriations Committee. Secretary Bennett, Besant, was asked about whether or not Iran and Russia had benefited from the lift of sanctions by the United States, and they were asked about gaining profit as well as other benefits. So any country whose sanctions are lifted, they're going to benefit from that. They're able to gain a profit from their product again, period. That's just how it works. And trying to state that countries have not benefited is a lie. Secretary Besant did state that Iran and Russia did not benefit from the lift in sanctions. I'm pretty positive that they did. Senator Fisher was also at this committee hearing talking about the working families tax credit. She asked Secretary Besant about the tax credit, and I'm going to tell you before I even get started on his answer that what she supports is not enough for our nation. It's not enough for the parents and the providers here in our nation. The working families tax credit is actually for businesses. It's not for individual people. The working families tax credit is applied for when you fill out your W-2 for a new employer. And to be perfectly honest, that whole system is just as complicated. The SAISA takes care of that. Not only does it provide the parenting and caregiver tax credit that I spoke of, it provides credits to daycare providers and individual providers. So, including paid leave for family leave. You have to take care of a child at home for a while. Just had a child and you need time to recuperate and build a relationship with your child. The current tax credit only applies to businesses for that. So in the SAISA, taking care of adult family members is also a caregiver credit that can be claimed. Those who need permanent care, like those with debilitating autism, even with some who may be more higher functioning, but they still need constant care. All those caregiver credits go to the individual and not the businesses under the SAISA, which gives you more of a refund at the end of the year. It's pretty good. So I can guarantee you that Senator Fisher's working families tax credit is not enough for what our nation needs right now. And paid leave needs to be at least 2 years, like I said. I support it for the individual, not for the business. Family and paid medical leave is currently an employer tax credit. It's not an individual tax credit. And the employer is not the one who's caring for the child. The parents are. So it makes more sense to give the caregivers, the actual caregivers, the parents and daycare providers and family members and others who care for individuals that credit instead of businesses. Senator Van Hollen was also at this hearing and asked Secretary Bessent about $500 million in World Liberty Financial Services and then another $2 billion as a payment to the EU. And Secretary Bessent could not answer him properly. I mean, he couldn't answer any of those questions. It was definitely a dodge. You could definitely tell. And he was also asked about firing 27,000 employees and then hiring some of them back. Secretary Bessent did not answer that either. He just wanted to make corrections and didn't give any numbers. As it happens, I happen to have some estimates on that note. This is a per employee cost breakdown. It's an estimate. Separation costs around $5,000. Administrative processing, equipment recovery, exit interviews, recruitment and background checks, another $12,000. This is extensive vetting for tax data access. Training is $25,000 to $45,000. And this is per cost. Okay. And then if you have to replace that employee, it's an estimated another $42,000 to $62,000. So if you have 27,000 employees that have been terminated, that fiscal loss is around $1.134 billion. That's a lot of money to lose. And then whenever you factor in rehiring any individuals, that exceeds $1.5 billion. So there's a little bit of a cost breakdown for an answer to Secretary Bessent's question he was supposed to answer. Unfortunately, we see a lot of dodging in questions, but it's important for us to know as a nation what those kinds of numbers look like, specifically, the cost of firing and then rehiring. So we have a lot to think about on this. And last year, the IRS effectively lost over $1 billion in taxpayer value, simply trying to manage its own revolving door. Because the tax code is a 70,000-page maze, they are forced to spend upwards of $50,000 training new hires, only to see 27,000 people be terminated or walk out the door. They aren't just wasting money doing this. They're wasting our money, our tax dollars. And this money could be spent on retiring the national debt. That is all I have for today. Please check out my website, tannerforcongress.com. And the link will be available in the description of this video or in the comments, depending on which platform you're looking at this on. Thank you for your time, and may our path lead to peace and prosperity.